Welcome back everybody, my name is Midnight Otaku, and today we will continue on some more Umineko the Naku Koro ni Rendo the Witch and Reeds now. So,
そういや夏日姉さん最近頭痛の方はどうなんや
actually before we begin, let me actually view the tips that we have received. Ushiromiya Jessica, Kurosano Asui's daughter. In the absence of any irregularities, it is thought that she will eventually inherit the headship of the Ushiromiya family, or technically her husband will. However, she seems to have no interest in all this. She was born with weak bronchi and sometimes assailed by sudden asthma attacks. Ushiromiya Eva, Kinzo's second child. She is hostile towards her brother Cross and opposes him whenever she can, from issues dealing with the family fortune to the question of who will succeed the family headship. Normally, she would have lost her place in the Ushiromiya family register upon her marriage, but she managed to forcibly overcome this by having her husband take her family name. Ushiromiya Hideyoshi, Eva's husband. He took his wife's name upon their marriage and became a member of the Ushiromiya family. He therefore does not possess the spiteful genes passed down through Ushiromiya family members, and his bright smile is very refreshing at the family conferences. He started his business from scratch, now works as the president of a medium-sized restaurant chain. This chain seems to be growing and performing extremely well. Ushiromiya George, Evan Hideyoshi's son, an affable young man liked by everyone in the family, is currently studying as an assistant for his father's company, and it seems he dreams of making it on his own one day. As the oldest of the four cousins, he acts as their leader and arbiter. Ushiromiya Rudolph, Kinzo's third child. Along with his sister Eva, he intends to make his voice heard during the family conferences to prevent their eldest sibling Cross from keeping all of their father's wealth for himself. His former wife, Asumu, passed away 6 years ago, and he married his current wife, Kirie, shortly after that. Uchimiya Kirie, Rudolph's second wife. She had already worked alongside him for some time before the death of his first wife, at which time she openly took the position of his wife. She has served as Rudolph's right hand in several shady pieces of business, guiding them to success. She is quick thinking and well trusted by her husband. Ushimiya Battler, the son of Rudolph and his fourth wife, Asumu. When his father married his second wife shortly after Asumu's death, Battler rebelled and went to live with his grandparents on his mother's side. However, both of these grandparents passed away, and he has now returned to the Ushiromiya family after 6 years. His family conferences transfer him to renew his friendship with the cousins after a 6-year gap. Ushimiya Rosa, Kinzo's fourth child. She is by far the youngest of the four siblings. It seems that this gives her a weaker position at the family conference. She manages a design company, but she is yet to start taking it seriously, and his financial situation is far from favorable. Ushiromiya Maria, Rosa's daughter. Her father's identity is unknown. She can't shake off the habit of speaking like a young child, which often earns her scolding. She has no interest in studying or making friends, but is very interested in things concerning the occult and black magic. Thanks to her excellent powers of memorization, she knows all kinds of obscure trivia. Servant Cannon, a young servant. He performs his duties silently and diligently, but is not so highly regarded as a servant due to his insatiable nature. There are multiple other servants with the own character and their pseudonyms. He and Shannon just happen to be the ones on duty the day. Servant Goda, servant hired as a cook. He hasn't served this family long, but through his earlier jobs and previous experience, he has cultivated a talent for entertaining guests. Because of this, he is very highly regarded as a servant. Servant Kumasawa. This elderly woman is a part-timer who, though she has quit her job several times along the way, has served the family for a great many years in total. She is crafty, more than competent when it comes to performing her duties, but because of her chattiness and love of rumor, she is not highly regarded as a servant. Any tips? Nope. Alright. Continuing on with the main story.
一時だいぶしんどそうにしとったろ。
おかげで最近はだいぶ調子がいいです。心配をしてくれてありがとう。
そうだ、これ夏日姉さんにお土産。
いつもありがとう。あなたには何かをもらってばかりね。これは紅茶？
ペパーミントとレモンバームのハーブティー。頭痛によく効くって有名なお店のブレンドなの。姉さんにも効くかなって思って。
Rosa was always a conscientious woman. Probably because she was the youngest of four and much younger than the other three. She managed to grow up without gaining the venomous nature of her siblings. Her kind words got Natsui to soften her expression for just a moment, but it wasn't enough to melt her stony gaze, hardened as it was by long years of mental stress. Sounds rough.
そういえばあなた、いっつも頭痛だって言ってたわね。しっかりなさいな。ジェシカちゃん、今年は受験でしょ？人生の節目じゃない。母親のあなたがそんなじゃ頼りないわよ。それに夏日姉さん、私より3つも若いんだから、もうちょっとしっかりなさい。ごめんなさい。生まれつきの頭痛持ちなもので。
Even under normal circumstances, Eva sometimes failed to choose her words carefully, but her comments seemed that Natsui contained shards of obvious malice, though she hid it with a smile. Of course, that fact didn't escape Natsui. She finally contained her urge to grimace and pretend to ignore Eva.
うちのバトラ君も今年は受験でしょ？ルドルフさんも少しは関心を持ったら？自分の息子のために夏日姉さんみたいに頭痛になるくらい真剣になりなさいよ。
俺が何か言えば必ず反抗するやつだぜ。じゃあなんて言うんだ。むしろ逆で遊んでていいぞっていうのか？あいつそういうのだけは素直に聞きやがるぜ。秀吉兄さんのところは受験本当にうまくいったじゃないですか。ぜひ子供操縦術の秘訣を教えてくださいよ。
そうやな。何のために勉強するのかっちゅうことを説いたかもしれんな。個々の勉強に意味があるわけやないんや。そう、勉強っちゅうのはわからんことを自分で調べて身につけるという行為の練習なんや。これができんやつは社会に出ても使い物にならん。国語算数ができろと言ってるんやない。勉強し身につけることを学べっちゅうことやな。
ご立派ですわ。うちのジェシカにもそれが理解できればいいんだけど、今のままではとてもじゃないけど後ろ宮家の跡取りとしては。いいじゃないの、無理に跡取りにしなくても。女には女の幸せというものもあるんだし、それを親が押し付けちゃ悪いわよ。
Even though you force it on your son all the time.
子供の育て方は家それぞれや。押し付けがましいのはあかんで。
ごめんなさい。夏日姉さんも気を悪くしないでね。
Though the light shining in through the window was quite warm despite the cloudy weather, there was a dark mood about the room, which was probably causing headaches for more than just Natsui. As to sweep away that mood, Kirie brightly made a suggestion to all present.
でも本当に素敵な香りの紅茶ね。早速いただいてみましょうよ。レオポルドの紅茶なんて日本じゃ確か銀座でしか買えなかったはずよ。
キリエ姉さんはお詳しいですね。買ってきた甲斐がありました。
Kiwi and Rosa stood up from their seats and made us to prepare the black tea, but Natsui forestalled them.
お二人ともありがとう。それは後でいただきましょう。うちの者がすぐお茶を持ってきますので、どうぞおくつろぎください。
二人とも後にしろよ。ウェルカムドリンクくらいごちそうになろうぜ。
Rudolph gave a subtle signal with knives for them to sit down again. Kiwi and Rosa understood instantly and immediately returned to their seats. The initial greeting of the guests was complete, so it was time for them to be served some tea. It was embarrassing for the host that the tea was late, especially now that the guests were talking about making tea themselves. Natsui bit her lower lip, frustrated by the inaptitude of servants who were late bringing in the tea. Seeing her face, Eva immediately started to giggle. Of course, Shannon had no way of knowing what was taking place in the parlor. She came pushing a serving cart piled with teacups. For no apparent reason, Natsuki gave her a pained look, and Shannon couldn't help but flinch without knowing what she had done wrong.
失礼いたします。お茶のご用意をさせていただきます。
おう、シャノンちゃん、久しぶりやの。ますますべっぴんさんになりよったな。
いえ、どうも。
He's very shy.
おしゃべりは配膳を済ませてからになさい。お茶が冷めます。
申し訳ございません、奥様。
She apologized like a small, frightened animal, bumped against the serving cart, and made a jarring racket as she dropped several teaspoons. Her clumsiness made Natsuki's expression turn even darker, which made Shin quail even more.
いいのよ、夏日姉さん。挨拶の一つくらいしたってどうってことないわよ。もう十分待たされてる分、十分お茶も冷めてるもの。
それは大丈夫です。冷めてはおりませんので。
シャノン、早く配膳を済ませなさい。
失礼しました、奥様。
Natsuki's irritation was obvious by now. Yeah, you can definitely tell it in that facial expression of hers. The ineptitude that delayed the tea, the clumsiness of the servant, everything pointing to the incompetence in Natsuki's everyday leadership, making her lose face. As the person in charge of the Ushiromiya head family's kitchen, allowing that clumsiness to be exposed, today of all days, was surely nothing less than total humiliation.
よせよ、夏日姉さん。シャノンちゃんだって頑張ってるのに、いじめちゃかわいそうだぜ。
いじめてなんかいません。
いい香りね。お茶の銘柄を聞いてもいいかしら。
申し訳ございません。後ほど調べてまいります。
Kyrie was trying to be nice, hoping to cut through the tense mood. However, Shannon embarrassed herself instead, darkening Natsui's face in the room's mood. By this point, Eva was audibly giggling.
なーに？シャノンちゃん、自分で入れてるものが何かもわからないの？ダメよ。そんな怪しげなものを来客に振る舞っちゃ。こんなお茶じゃ銀のスプーンでもないと飲めないわよ。
The silver spoons used to test for poison.
すみません。すぐに用意を。
ねえシャノンちゃん、銀のスプーンって何に使うか知ってる？銀じゃないとダメなのよ。なぜかわかる？
いえ、
A teasing smile rose to Eva's face as she stared at Shannon sitting at the table. By itself, Eva's expression was sweet in an impish sort of way. However, the words being spun from her lips held the keenness of a razor within them. Shannon tried with all her might to avoid Eva's continuing gaze. Realizing that Shannon was hard-pressed for an answer, Rosa gave some timely help.
銀は毒に触れると曇るって言われてるの。シャノンちゃんも一つお勉強ができたわね。
They were acting as though this tea needed to be tested for poison before it could be drunk. In Natsui's eye, this was an insult both to the tea and to herself for serving it. Rudolph laughed flippantly and patted Eva's shoulder.
姉貴に銀食器なんていらねえだろ。毒舌の姉貴が人なめしたら銀の皿だって真っ黒に曇っちまうぜ。
わしはその毒舌を毎日聞かされとるからもう毒に耐性がついてしもたわ。
Is that really something you should say when their wife in the room?
エヴァもわし相手には構わんが耐性のない相手にはちと加減せんとな。
あらあらひどい。シャノンちゃんにお茶の知識を教えてあげただけじゃない。
Everyone followed the lead set by Hideyoshi's horse laugh and chuckled, though not easily. Only Natsui didn't join in. But for the time being, the conversation inside the parlor could now be mistaken for a lively and friendly chat. As Shannon finally finished setting the tea table and tried to leave, Kirie apologized to her in a low voice for not being able to help. Shannon gave a light bow and made a hasty retreat. Shannon cast her eyes downward as she pushed the cart down the corridor. Anyone seeing the pitiful way she looked might easily conclude that she had been bullied in some way. Wow, the artwork looks so good. The hallways actually have detail now.
気を落とさないで。姉さんは何も悪くない。
見てたのね。
そういうお役目だから。奥様もエヴァ様も地獄へ落ちろ。でもそれより卑劣なのはあいつだ。
Kane glared hatefully in the opposite direction of the parlor. The preparations for the tea had been delayed by some trifling problems in the kitchen. These problems were not Shannon's fault. In fact, it had been Goda's mistake. After all, there was no way a show-off like Goda would give up a flashy job like bringing in tea when the guests arrived. He had ended up wasting time preparing the tea once again. So, when he realized he wouldn't be able to score any points for this job, he pushed the task aside on the table on Shin, who happened to be passing by. You might call it a clever move on his part, but there could be no doubt that it was a cowardly one.
いいの。ありがとう、カノン君。私、全然気にしていないし。
Ken's silence vividly expressed the distance between Shannon's words and how she actually felt.
ありがとう。カノン君だけでも分かってくれたんで、ちょっと心が楽になったかな。
姉さんは心にいろいろ溜め込みすぎる。たまには自分に優しくしてあげて。
ありがとうね。
Suddenly they both felt someone's presence and whirled around. Oh, if it isn't Genji. A middle-aged man stood there. It was Genji, the head servant.
そこで何をしている？シャノン、早く厨房に戻りなさい。
はい、失礼いたしました。
Shin humbly obeyed and promptly made to push the cart and leave. However, Ken appealed to Genji in silence, bearing something in his eyes that he could not express in words.
どうした？何かあったか？
シャノンは何も悪くないのに。あいつら。
やめて。 てカノン君、失礼しました。すぐに仕事に戻ります。カノン君も自分の持ち場に戻ってお願い。
姉さんがそう言うなら。
何事もないならそうしなさい。
Wow.
はい。失礼します。
From the shadows in the hallway, an old woman wearing an apron watched over them. It was Kumasawa.
おいたわしや、シャノンさん、カノンさん、あの二人がいじめられる理由は何もないのです。
Yeah, there are certain parts in the game where it will not be an ADV style.
しかし、ゴーダさんに嫌われているのは紛れもない事実。ゴーダさんは後宮本家へいらっしゃられるまでどこかの立派なホテルにお勤めだったそうです。そこで身につけられたというお仕事ぶりはそりゃ大したものだとは思います。ただゴーダさんはここでは最も年季の短い使用人。ご自身のそれまでの積み重ねによるプライドもあられたのでしょう。彼は自分より長い年季を持ちながらも未熟で人生経験も及ばないシャノンさんとカノン君をことあるごとにいびられるのです。また気の毒なことに夏日奥様にも嫌われております。もちろん年季という意味では奥様の方が長くこの家におられます。ただこればかりは奥様にも同情しなくてはなりません。本当に親方様も罪作りな方でございます。
Many sins.
ご自身のちょっとした気まぐれが奥様にこれほどまでの劣等感をお与えになるとはどうして思い至らなかったのでしょう。もちろん奥様とて内心はあの二人に辛く当たる言われは何もないことを重々承知してはおります。しかしそれが理屈で分かっているからといってどうにもならないのが人の心。ああ、ほいたわしや。私には何もできずこうして物陰から見守ることしかできないのです。
It's kind of weird. You watch over him from the shadows. Maybe there's another intro. The four of his cousins were enjoying our stories, just shooting the breeze. Anyway, there were both girls and guys here. Plus, we had people over a wide spread of ages, adult, high school, and elementary school. Even if we just talked about our own lives, the other three kept listening attentively.
なんかやっと馴染んできたぜ。
Actually, I'm really curious about that picture on the wall. As to what it actually is.
ジェシカもマリアも6年前からは想像もつかないくらい成長しちまったからよ。
The gold one.
正直なところ少しだけ違和感を持ってたんだが、こうして話をしているうちに中身はあの頃から何も変わってないことが分かったぜ。
同じ言葉を返してやるよ。バトラだって6年ぶりだってのに全然変わってねえぜ。
I just noticed that most of the Ushiromiya family had the same colored eyes.
図体がいくらでかくなっても中身は相変わらずお子様だってことだな。マ
リアもお子様。
マリアだっていつまでもお子様じゃねえぞ。お子様から可愛いお姫様に成長してくんだからな。そうしたらまな板みてえな胸もすぐジェシカ並みになるぞ。
Really something you should be telling a 9-year-old?
そしたら揉ませてくれよ、約束だぞ。
揉ませる。約束する。
ダメだよマリアちゃん。そんな約束しちゃダメ。
約束したから揉ませる。マリア、約束は守る。絶対守る。
マリア、お前本当に素直ないい子だな。お前と結婚する未来の旦那さんはきっと幸せ者だぜ。
っていい話にすり替えつつ約束を保持してんじゃねえぜ。マリア、その約束はなしなし。
約束取り消し。
やっぱりバトラ君も揃って4人で集まらないといとこが集合した気がしなかったね。この6年はやっぱり寂しかったよ。
そうだな。こういうふざけた話にはならなかったな。でも建設的な話はできてたと思ったぜ。将来に対する心構えとか受験とか就職とかよ。
悪うございましたね。俺が来たらおまぬけなドタバタばっかりでよ。
でもマリアは今年のが楽しい。
そうだね、僕も同感。今年が一番楽しいよ。
Maria's sincere words. Maria's sincere words probably spoke for everyone present. George and Nikki stroked Maria's head, and she giggled like a happy kitten.
失礼いたします。お食事のご用意ができました。
The timid knocking sound and the equally timid voice of a young woman came through the door. Jessica answered brightly.
シャノン、入れよ。バトラは覚えてるだろ。
Jessica stood up from the bed and opened the door. There stood a servant girl who must have been about our age.
ご無沙汰いたしております。バトラ様、6年ぶりでございます。シャノンです。
Trembling a little as she noticed me, she bowed deeply.
ジェシカにも驚かされたが、シャノンちゃんにも驚かされたぜ。あんたもすっかり美人になったじゃねえのよ。
もったいないお言葉、強烈に存じます。
しかしよ、この島じゃよっぽど食事の栄養価が高いんじゃねえのか。何を食ってどこを鍛えたらそんなにでっかいお胸になるんだか。ジェシカとどっちがでけえかちょいと触って確かめさせてもらうぜ。
I assume that Madeline really likes boobs. With both hands poised and saliva dripping from my mouth, I closed them. For the sake of justice and my personal honor, I'd like to point out that I don't suffer from some strange disease that makes my lymph nodes itch and I scratch my neck open, and which can only be prevented by fondling breast. That is clearly a reference to Higurashi no Naku Koro. This is just a Battler-style method of communication. It's an odd method of communication. If I slowly close in on her like this, odds are 8 or 9 out of 10 that I get slapped or clobbered, right? So I can use this Battler semi-original technique to spark a gag like that and break the ice. Well, it also means I really do get to touch them on that 1 in 10 chance though, right? Yeah, like that would ever happen. At that point, my hands were less than a centimeter away from Shin-Shin's boobs, but the counter-strike had yet to come. She blushed and lowered her head in embarrassment when she realized what was going on. But she just stood there with both hands slightly joined in front of her, not even trying to resist to cover her breast. Hey, I wasn't planning on this. Please, hit me right now or I'm seriously gonna... Which is why I was glad that Jessica chose that time to drive her elbow into the back of my head.
ジェシカ、ありがとうよ。
なんで私が感謝されんだ？
いやいや、すまんぜシャノンちゃん。魅力的な胸に思わず吸着されそうになっちまった。つうか、さすがにあの間合いまで来たら犯罪確定だろ。ダメだぜ、抵抗しなきゃよ。
ですけど、バトラ様は大切なお客様ですし。
あのな、お客様でも犯罪は犯罪。女の子の胸はだいたい10センチくらいからが防空識別圏だな。2センチ圏まで侵入してきたら、これはもう領空侵犯だぜ。スクランブル発進で即ビンタを食らわせてやれ。
そんなことできません。私たちは家具ですし。
Of course she knew when her breast touched, but if a guest so desired, she was prepared to sacrifice herself to suit their wants. A girl like this needs some urgent protection.
今時こんな献身美徳な子がいるとは。軽いめまいすら覚えるぜ。でもダメだ、ダメなんだ。俺がいやらしい顔で迫る。ハットハウスいやエッチ。そういうお約束じゃないとオチがつかねえんだよ。頼むよ、お願いでよ。俺を引っ叩いてくれよ。こうバチンバチンと。
お願いは聞けません。家具ですから。
Why do you call yourself furniture?
でも命令ならお聞きします。それが務めですから。
じゃあ命令させてもらうことにするよ。次からバトラ君が胸に触ろうとしてきたら平手打ちで反撃すること。いいね。
はい、仰せつかりました。以後そのようにさせていただきます。バトラ様、ご承知おきくださいませ。
It's normally what you're supposed to do. Shouldn't you announce this by bowing elegantly to me? Her expression was radiant. I gave her a thumbs up to show her I was fine with that.
6年前はお手伝いさんの連れ子がついでにお手伝いみたいな印象だったんだけど、すっかり一人前の使用人さんだな。今年で何年になるんだ？
はい、おかげさまで10年ほどお使いさせていただいております。
That is a really long time. She's Shannon. The kanji for her neighbors are read as Shannon. Now here's another name that's far from typical for a Japanese person. Back in the day, I was a kid myself, so I accepted her name without paying it much attention. Thinking about it now, her name's pretty unusual, even though she's not a member of the Ushiromiya family. Maybe it's like a servant's professional name or something. And so that might explain why her name's so similar to Cannon-kun, that kid I met earlier in the Rose Garden. She's a long-term servant who served here since she was 6 years old. Wow. Her appearance had changed so much that I couldn't match her to the person of my memories, but we both knew each other 6 years ago. That shy part of her had always been there, but she did seem to have developed the allure you'd expect of a girl her age, especially in her breast. Yes.
さっき会ったカノ君は彼女の弟なんだよ。
And we just Servant Shannon, a young but experienced servant. She's normally calm and performs her job efficiently, but she messes up when she gets nervous. Furthermore, Shannon is nothing more than a pseudonym that she uses when on duty, not her real name. So we still got 5 more characters that we have not met yet.
弟というわけでは。でも、私のことを姉と慕ってくれます。何か失礼なことはしませんでしたか？
相変わらずいつも通りだぜ。もうちょっと愛想よくすればいいのによ。もったいないよ。
カノン君がご迷惑をおかけしたようで申し訳ございません。
別に迷惑なんか何も。同じ男としてわかるさ。ありゃ気難しい年頃だ。愛想が悪いのは当たり前だぜ。
マリアもよく言われる。愛想悪いって言われる。カノンと一緒。マリア様は愛想悪くなんかありません。一緒が良かった。
食事の準備ができたんだっけ？
はい、失礼いたしました。お食事のご用意が整いましたので、皆様をお屋敷へご案内いたします。
Shannon bowed again, formally returned to her duty mode. We realized that if we made her stick around for any more light conversation, it would actually make it harder for her to do her job. We got up off our butts to avoid interfering with our work any further.
じゃあ、お屋敷に行こうか。
Why
みん
not?
なもお腹が空いてたところでしょ。
だな。ゴーダさんがいる時の飯は楽しみなんだよ。あの人、どこぞの有名ホテルでシェフをやってたらしくて、かなり料理の腕があるんだぜ。
ほうほう、それ楽しみ。行こうぜマリア。ガツガツ犬みたいに食い散らかすぞ。
I'm teaching her bad manners again.
犬みたいに食い散らかす。
ダメダメ。バトラ君の言うことはいちいち真に受けちゃダメだよ。全部冗談なんだから。さあ、行こう行こう。
Under Shang-Chan's guidance, we headed towards the mansion. Met once again by the magnificent rose garden, we continued onward, as the intimidating mansion of the Ushiromiya head family came into view. It had apparently been built shortly after the war, so you could feel the dignity of almost a half-century hanging about it. The building was gorgeous on the surface, but old as it was, equipment such as its AC and heating were apparently quite frail. According to Jessica, midwinter was especially tough with all the drafts. How many of these people have heard of a kotatsu? For any of you that did not know, a kotatsu is actually a heated table. As we entered the entrance hall, an age servant greeted us. Now him I remembered. Genji-san, who had been working here longer than anyone, filled the role of head servant.
バトラ様、お久しゅうございます。
Check out his character profile. Servant Genji, the leader of the servants who work for the Ushiromiya family. He has served Kinzo longer than any other and is the person most trusted by that old man. Since he serves Kinzo directly, Cross and Natsui think of him as being a spy for Kinzo. Oh yes, Genji is a spy. As our eyes met, he greeted me with a calm, composed voice. His bow wasn't as graceful or refined as Goda's, but despite its simplicity, it communicated his feelings very well.
源氏さん、本当にお久しぶりっす。お元気そうですね。
おかげさまで健やかに過ごさせていただいております。 バトラ様こそご立派になられました。親方様の若き日に少し似てこられましたな。
俺がじい様にってことは、さぞやじい様は若い頃モテたろうな。
ここからはシャノンに代わって私がご案内申し上げます。どうぞこちらへ。
Chen bowed deeply and watched us leave. After that, we headed towards the dining room under Genji-san's guidance. Genji-san, just like Kumasawa-san, stood in stark contrast to us young people who had grown beyond recognition over the last 6 years. His appearance was exactly the same as in my memories from 6 years ago. It was as though time had stopped since the last time we met. Genji-san was an extremely quiet and diligent person. He was basically grandfather's close aide or caregiver, and you might even call him grandfather's companion of many years. In fact, it seems he was by grandfather's side even more often than my late grandmother was. According to Jessica, grandfather trusted him more than any of his blood relatives. But I wonder how long he served. I never got the details, but I heard something about him being here since the very beginning when the mansion was first constructed, which would mean that he's dedicated half of his life to serving here. It's easy to see why he's so trusted. Yeah. As we passed through a massive hall that extended up into the second story of the mansion with no separating floor, I spotted something that had existed in my memory as 6 years ago. A very beautiful portrait. There was an awfully big portrait hanging right in front of the stairs that rose to the second floor. Without thinking, I stopped walking, captivated by it. Since I'd stopped so fast, Maria, who was following behind me, ran into my back.
No, Jessica. I
pointed at the big, prominently displayed portrait in the hall. Everyone else stopped too.
ああ、そっか。バトラが来てた頃には、あれはかけられてなかったっけ？いつからだったかな。
確か、僕の記憶が正しければ、一昨年あたりだったと思うよ。
さようでございます。一昨年の4月に親方様がかねてより画家に命じて描かせていたものをあそこに展示なされたのでございます。
あのじい様がね、わざわざ描かせてか。
The portrait suited in this western mansion, and that woman in the elegant dress gave off a sense of refinement. I couldn't have guessed her age, but her sharp eyes and the strong will she seemed to possess made her look youthful. She seemed somehow different from the composed, middle-aged woman you often see in famous pictures. If she had normal black hair, I might have assumed it was a portrait of my long-deceased grandmother in her prime. However, she had beautiful blonde hair and didn't look Japanese at all.
で、誰だい？このご婦人はよ。
Maria answered that simple question enthusiastically as though proud she knew the answer.
マリア知ってる。ベアトリーチェ。
ベア、なんだって？
ベアトリーチェ、魔女だよ。バトラ君は昔聞かされたことない？
魔女？って。この島の？
I think I already said this, but Rokkenjima is a small island only 10 kilometers in circumference. However, that's actually pretty massive considering that only the Ushiromiya family lives here. I was about to say, that's massive. So only the harbor and the area around the mansion were set to be lived in. Beyond that, the island remained as untouched as when it was uninhabited. The vast and empty forest had absolutely no lights, phones, or people passing through. To understand how dangerous that is, you need to forget your common sense as a city dweller. After all, if you happen to fall down a hole in the depths of the forest and sprain your ankle, no one would come save you, no matter how much you cried or screamed. Then, once the sun went down, the forest would be wrapped in complete darkness since there were no street lights. And since there were no signs, it'd be easy to get lost and confused, losing your sense of direction inside that dark forest. Nowadays, most people see a forest as a peaceful place, but to the people of bygone eras, before the light of civilization drove out the night, forests were as geographically separated from civilization as the sea. There were oceans above the ground. Fishermen who go out into the ocean are putting their lives at risk despite their technical knowledge. In the same way, hunters who go out to the forest are in danger despite having specialized knowledge of their own. If children were to go play in such a dangerous forest, something terrible might happen. Someone's parent must have thought so. Maybe grandmother first said it, or maybe it was grandfather himself. Or perhaps the story's been passed down on the zone since ancient times. There's a terrible witch in the forest, so you must not go in. At some point, this ghost story of Rakanjima was born. That is the legend of Rakanjima's witch. That's why when we talk about a witch in the island, we're referring to the master of that vast and savage forest. Come to think of it, when I stayed at this mansion as a little kid, during those eerie nights when the wind and rain pounded on the windows, I remember being terrified by the story of the forest witch who roamed around searching for human sacrifices. So, Beatrice. Huh? When Annie mentioned it, I searched my memory and I was sure I recalled hearing a name like that when I was little. It's quite a story.
しかし、あの魔女伝説の魔女にベアトリーチェなんておしゃれな名前がついてたとはとんと忘れてたぜ。じいさまめ、孫たちが信じないもんだからわざわざ絵に描きやがったか。
じいさまの妄想の中の魔女だよ。この絵を掲げた頃から現実と幻想の区別がつかなくなり始めた。私たちにとっては想像の中の魔女に過ぎないけど、じいさまにとっては彼女はこの島にいる存在。いる。だからそれを理解することができない私たちにもわかるようあの絵を描かせたって言うんだけど気持ち悪いったらありゃしないぜ。
お嬢様、親方様にとっては大切な肖像画です。親方様の前でそのようにおっしゃられることがございませんよう固く
分かってるぜ。頼まれても言わねえよ。
Jessica glanced at the portrait with an irritated gaze before turning away.
行こうよ。食堂にみんなを待たせてるよ。
お腹すいた。
Only a small portion of this island was controlled by the Ushiromiya family. All of the lawless remainder was the domain of the witch, Beatrice. You might even call her the true ruler of Rakanjima. I felt a faint revival of that unsettling sense of misfortune, which I felt when I learned of the Totolary's god shrine being struck by lightning. And I remembered that Kumasawa-san tried to tell an ominous story about Rakanjima, before Jessica stopped her. I don't know what she was planning to tell us about this island, but I do know one thing. It isn't the Ushiromiya family that rules Rakanjima. It's the witch Beatrice. That's right. After all, this is the Witch Island. When I looked around, everyone was already heading towards the dining room. I hurriedly chased after them. We walked up to the huge double doors that led to the dining room. Genji-san knocked.
お子様方をお連れいたしました。 失礼いたします。
The doors were opened and we were invited inside. The door opening sound always sounds like a theater reel rolling. The dining room, which I looked around like you'd imagine a rich person's dining room to be, had a super long table that was obviously positioned with no purpose other than to make the guests conscious of their rank. My parents were already sitting in accordance with that ordering.
遅えぞガキども。早く席につけよ。
The old bastard pressed us to sit. The only gaps in that group of people were the spots we were supposed to sit, which only made us feel our tardiness all the more. The seat at the head of the table, called the incipient's chair, was for the most highly ranked reserved for garden father. It was still empty. He probably wanted to show it last for dramatic effect. From the perspective of someone facing the incipient's chair head on, the seating order went from left to right, with the lower ranking seats progressing in rows of two further away from it. So the left-hand side of the first row closest to the incipient chair was where Uncle Crosswell sat, since he was the second highest in rank. It looked like he hadn't arrived yet, so that seat was empty. Across from his chair, on the right side of the first row, sat the eldest daughter of the family, Eva, who was the third highest in rank. The left-hand side of the second row was for the fourth highest in rank. There sat my damn dad, Rudolph, the third of the siblings. Across from him on the right side of the second row sat Aunt Rosa, youngest sibling. At this point, you might expect their husbands and wives to come next. But nope, the left-hand seat in the third row, ranked number 6, belonged to Jessica. Opposite her was Georgia Nikki. I sat next to Jessica. And Maria sat across from me. Then finally next to me on the left-hand side of the fifth row sat Aunt Natsui, the 10th highest in rank. Opposite her was Uncle Hideyoshi. Next to Aunt Natsui in the sixth row in the final seat on the left-hand side sat Kirie-san. The seat opposite to Kirie-san was empty, even though silverware had been set there and everything. According to the ranking system, that spot was where Aunt Rosa's husband should be seated. Even though he wasn't supposed to be coming, his place was made up. Normally, ranking systems of this sort give spouses equal positions as their partners, but the Ushiromiya family system was unique. Maybe it's a remnant of male chauvinism. We start with the assumption that a woman's womb is just something to be borrowed, and the children of direct descent would come first, directly followed by the grandchildren. In other words, spouses have no blood ties and are therefore placed at the end of the line. It's terrible, but by this system, my grandmother would be ranked even lower than me if she were still alive. In their youth, they obey their father. After they get married, their husband. After aging, their children. There's the old saying, women have no home in any realm. Long ago, when I was still incapable of figuring all this out, I thought it was so great that we could all chat in our little groups about adult siblings with adult siblings and cousins with cousins. However, now that I can re-examine the seating order after growing up a bit, it serves up some very complicated feelings in me. Aunt Natsui was married to the eldest son and was the de facto number 2 in managing this family, sat to my right, which meant that she was 2 steps lower than me in the ranking order. It was hard to imagine what might be going on inside her heart. That's why I made a small apologetic gesture towards her before sitting down.
お久しぶりですね、バトラ君。ずいぶん背が伸びましたね。
はい。食ったり食べたり食事したりしてたらいつの間にかこんな身長に。
さすが男の子ね。身長はいくつくらいあるの
？180かな。
No, that's tall.
つうかおばさん、そこは食べてばっかりじゃねえかって突っ込んでくださいよ。
え？ああ。ごめんなさいね。
After a short pause, she did laugh at me, but soon she couldn't quite figure out what she was supposed to be laughing at. This woman is Aunt Natsui. She's the wife of the eldest son of the family, meaning she's my father's older brother's wife. Is it simpler if I just call her Jessica's mother? Yeah, I think that would be very simple. Feels bad to say it like this, but while I didn't exactly dislike her, I didn't particularly like her either. She hardly ever spoke with us kids, and all of my memories of her involve her talking to the adults about complicated things with a scary look on her face. In fact, since we hardly ever exchanged words, I spent a long time trying to figure out how I should approach her. And let's go here to view her character profile. And Ushiromiya Natsui, Cross's wife. She manages the household of the Ushiromiya head family in place of her husband, who takes little interest in such matters. She was in charge of all preparations and arrangements for this family conference. She possesses a strong sense of responsibility and a great deal of pride. However, neither her husband nor her siblings understand her very well, so her position is far from enviable. Wow. No one understands her. Though my efforts seem to have ended in failure. The silverware was set neatly on the table, but the meal itself hadn't been brought in yet. As a general rule, you couldn't start a meal until the person sitting at the head of the table arrived. So as long as grandfather didn't come, lunch would be put on hold indefinitely. Not even the appetizers would arrive. Simply put, the silence in this room was caused by our parents enduring their hunger and while they waited for grandfather to arrive. However, the grandfather from my memories would always show up on time to meals like this. He was the kind of person who would never be so late that it kept everyone waiting, especially after the entire group had arrived.
遅えな、じいさま。俺の記憶じゃ時間に厳格な人だったと思うんだけどな。
まあ6年前はそうだったかもな。最近はそうでもねえよ。というかもう自分の世界オンリーって感じで会食にも顔を出さねえぜ。さすがに今日くらいは足並みを揃えてくれるって思ってたんだけどな。まあ私は来ない方が気楽で嬉しいけどよ。
ジェシカ。
One of them scolded her. Jessica stuck her tongue out and looked away. No way around it. Might as well wait until our host arrives. When I glanced at the clock, I saw that it was almost 12:20. Ushiromiya Kinzo, the aged family head of the Ushiromiya head family. Ushiromiya Kinzo, the aged head of the Ushiromiya family. Even though it has already been announced that he has just a few months to live, he is brimming with energy. Though he amassed a vast fortune in the past, he never made any announcements regarding the inheritance, which worries his children. He is strongly influenced by the West and is a rabid fan of the occult. His study is packed with the mysterious grimoires. This man could be seen in his study. The clock had already passed noon, but he didn't even attempt to rise from his seat. With his spectacles on, he built up a growing pile of books with elaborate bindings, which he then read intently. You could really say that he was having too much fun to stop. Rather, he filled the room with a sense of impatience, or perhaps a sense of impending danger, as though every second wasted was a tragedy. In the sealed room, a dust danced through the air, which was thick with the stench of chemicals that exuded a mix of suspicious odors. Those odors were somehow sweet and heavy. If anyone with a normal nose came in here, the first thing they'd do would be to open a window and ventilate this room. The knocking against the study door had been growing on for a while. A voice calling father sometimes mingled with the knocks. As Kinzo heaved a deep sigh, he snapped shut the old book in his hands and slammed it on the table. Then he yelled at Cross, who was still knocking on the door.
Yakamoshi! その音を止めぬか愚か者。叩けば扉は開かれると誰が教えた。そのバカ者は貼り付けにしたぞ。お前もそうされたいのか。
お父さん、年に一度の親族会議の日ではありませんか。
皆下に集まっています。どうかおいでください。
Cross called out to his father through the door. Kinzo always shut himself up in the study, hating it when nearly anyone, even his family, entered the room. For that reason, Cross had no choice but to call to him from the corridors like this.
私にかがうでない。皆とは何か、私をここから引きずり出そうとする者どもなのか。ならば殺してしまい。バラバラにして薪にして魔女の炉にくべてしまい。その炉には鍋をかけて苦いおもぎを煮るがいい。
My God, he's talking on his son's deranged.
黙示録の煮汁はそれでも私をここから連れ出そうとするバカ者どもに飲ませてやれ。残りは酒につけるのだ。ああ、源氏はどこだ。源氏を呼べ。苦界の魔師を用意させろ。緑の妖精のささやきが届かぬ。ああ、源氏はどこだ。源氏を呼べ。
On the other side of the door, Cross, Nanjo, and Genji kept waiting for the master of the house, who sternly refused to come out.
すっかり嫌われてしまったようだ。もう私の声では何も届かんよ。
Cross shrugged as though saying it's no use and smiled bitterly. From the beginning, he had really expected his father to respond to his calls. However, since it was the duty of the eldest son, he had tried it as a formality.
Kinzo さん、あんたの顔を見に息子や娘や孫たちが来てるんじゃないか。ちょっと顔を見せてやったらどうだね。
うるさい、黙れ。私に意見するというか南條。貴様など呼んではおらぬ。私は源氏を呼べと言ったのだ。さあ急げ、すぐに呼べ。時間は常に有限だ。人たちはすでにラッパを構えているぞ。なぜにそれがわからぬか、愚かな羊どもめ。
Genzo slammed an old heavy book against the table over and over. That racket clearly expressed his great displeasure. Kinzo put his spectacles down and flew up from his chair. He spread his arms wide as if to sing to a packed opera house, as if appealing to someone, and yelled,
なぜだ。なぜにいつも私には邪魔が入るのか。すべてを捨てよう、すべてを捧げよう。その見返りに私は一つしか求めないというのに。ああ、ベアトリーチェ、お前の微笑みをもう一度見られるならば、私は世界中から美少を奪い取り、すべてをお前に捧げよう。おお、イナゴの軍団長たちよ。世界中から美少を刈り取り収穫せ。すべてが汚らわしい。すべてが煩わしい。なぜこの貴重な一日に私は邪魔を受けねばならぬのか。源氏を呼べ。
何を怒鳴ってるのかもさっぱりだな。もう頭がどうにかなっているのだろう。
クラウスさん、実のお父さんにそりゃあんまりじゃないかね。
親父はすでに死んでいる。ここにいるのは親父だったものの幻さ。いずれにせよ本人にここを出る意志がない以上どうにもならんね。
金蔵さん。
Choking Cost continued to pour from the study.
私は下に戻る。ゴーダの自慢のランチをこれ以上無駄に冷ましてしまうことはない。親類たちにとって当家での数少ない楽しみだろうからな。
Cross spun around. He looked at his watch, mumbling it as though he had wasted time doing something he knew would be in vain. Kinzo sure has some rude-ass children.
源氏さん、親父殿がお呼びだ。相手を頼む。かしこまりました。
南條先生、食事に行きましょう。いつまでもここにいると、この甘い匂いで味覚までおかしくなってしまう。
Without waiting for Nanja, Cross went downstairs. Genji urged Nanja to go and eat. Nanja glanced between the study door and Cross's back as the latter disappeared down the stairs, then let out a deep sigh.
すまんが、源氏さん、頼みます。
はい、お任せください。
お酒はなるべく与えないように。あれは常習性が強すぎる。
源氏はまだか。何者が源氏を阻んでいるというのか。源氏はどこだ。源氏を呼べ。
さあ、ここはお任せください。
すみませんな。
Nanja bowed slightly and descended the stairs. Genji watched him leave and knocked on the study door.
親方様、源氏でございます。
源氏か。何故私をこれほどに待たすのか。そこには誰もおるまいな。
はい、私だけでございます。
Kinzo returned to his seat in the study and pressed an old-fashioned switch on the table. After a small delay, the heavy sound of the door unlocking could be heard. Kinzo was convinced that his family wanted to make a mess of his study, or perhaps someone had once opened the window for some air and ended up scattering things that, to him, were important research materials, leaving him in a terrible mood. Kinzo had outfitted his room with a formidable lock, preventing anyone from entering without his permission and thereby sealing himself in a jail of his own making. Genji, whom he trusted the most, was relatively free to enter the room, but even that didn't always hold. If Kinzo was in a bad mood, even Genji wouldn't be able to enter. Anyone else would be limited to holding a conversation through the door, unable to even see Kinzo's face, and most of the time what they could hardly be called a conversation. Sounds paranoid. However, this didn't trouble the rest of the family much. After all, it just wasn't worth the effort to disturb this aging family head. It was impossible to please and always stayed shut away, immersed in his research. Taking advantage of his refusal to leave his room, they supported his isolation, putting his care entirely into the hands of the servants.
源氏、いつものやつを頼む。私は忙しい。
はい。
Genji headed to a corner of the study. There, suspicious-looking balls boasting venomous colors were on display. They were actually liquid, but considering the shady atmosphere of this room, one might easily suspect them of being some ghastly poison. Inside the study, the mysterious collection of books gathered by Kinzo had grown into a mountain. They were bizarre, ancient, or banned books, all of them either forbidden, cursed, or sealed. But if you tried to call them old books, Kinzo would fly into a rage and say, "Call them grimoires." There were also many mysterious objects that presumably held some meaning with regards to black magic, like candles suspiciously melted and molded into strange shapes. The constellations drawn in a certain celestial globe contained quite a few shapes that would draw looks from anyone familiar with today's night sky. The carelessly strewn about books contained many illustrations, all of them of religious or mysterious nature, including some depicting demonically grotesque subjects, bizarre diagrams of various magic circles, and above all, a sweet poisonous smell filled the room, profoundly assaulting the eyes and noses of those who entered for the first time. Eventually, it must surely make a person go numb and lose their grip on reality. Inside that study, Genji prepared Kinzo's usual drink with a well-trained hand. No one would even think of drinking such an ominous dark green liquid in that complex and ornate glass unless someone first told them it was alcohol. He poured a little into the glass. Then, he placed a cube of sugar in a strangely shaped spoon and poured water from a pitcher over it. Strangely, when the transparent water was poured, the dark green liquid turned a cloudy white. It was a strange optical illusion, as though the water caused a chemical reaction and made the drink become even more unrecognizable as liquor. Then Genji added original flavors Kinzo led fine-tuning its taste. There was no recipe. Its success was measured only by Kinzo's mood swings when he drank it, and it had taken Genji many decades to learn how to do it right. Genji placed the glass on a tray and walked over to Kinzo. By this time, Kinzo was gazing out the window. Kinzo regained his composure. It was not unrecognizable as the shouting, screaming, yelling men from a few moments ago. Looking at this man from behind as he tilted his glass and gazed down at the scenery beyond the window, he projected a sense of dignity and intelligence. To allow Kinzo to set his glass down at any time, Genji motionlessly waited behind Kinzo and to his left as though he were a living sideboard. Then, without averting his eyes from the window, Kinzo held out his glass. There was only a mouthful remaining. It was not a gesture intended to set it upon the tray, but a motion to hand the glass over to Genji. Well, Genji respectfully received the glass and inclined it a little to taste its contents. After that, he gulped it down. Kinzo smiled at his little subject. He refused to put aside drink even when asked to. However, he was not making fun of him. His smile was relaxed as though chuckling at a close friend's old, unshakable habit.
年を数えることも忘れてすでに久しい。
今日まで過ごすことをお許しいただけたのもすべて親方様のおかげでございます。
Kinzo gave a faint smile as if to say he didn't need any flattery.
今日まで本当によく私に仕えてくれた。息子たちは誰もが私を変人呼ばわりした。大勢いた使用人も皆私を恐れてやめていった。お前だけが今でも私に仕えてくれる。
もったいないお言葉です。
私の余命もそう長くはあるまい。息子たちは私の遺産がいつ転がり込んでくるかをうろうろ待つハゲタカばかりだ。クラウスの愚か者は金を湯水のように使い、1枚の金貨を売るのに2枚の金貨を捨てておる。それで金を稼げたなどと妄言を。エヴァは金の亡者だ。あやつは私を鶏か何かだと思っておる。死んだらガラにして出汁まで取る気だ。ルドルフの間抜けは女遊びばかり。ローザはどこの馬の骨ともわからん男の赤ん坊など産みおって、ジェシカは無能で無学だ。ジョージには男としての器がない。バトラーは後ろ宮家の栄誉を自ら捨ておった愚か者だ。マリアなど見るのも汚らわしい。なぜだ、なぜに後ろ宮の血はこうも無能なのか。私の築き上げた栄光を受け継ぐにふさわしい者はおらんのか。ああ、分かっておるとも。これがベアトリーチェの呪いであることも分かっておる。黄金の魔女め、それが私への復讐のつもりか。憎みたくば憎むがよい。 逃げたければ逃げるがよい。逃がさぬ逃がさぬ逃がさぬ逃がさぬわ。お前は私のものだ。常に私の腕の中でなくてはならん。私の生涯のすべてなのだ。我が鳥かごにて永遠に私だけにささやき続けるのだ。ベアトリーチェ、なぜに微笑み返してはくれぬ。
Probably because you sound. Probably because you sound possessive, or. After howling, Kinzo choked once again. Genji set the tray and glass down and brought his master's back. Genji's facial expression did not change. It was always like this. When these seemingly deranged fits subsided, Kinzo regained his composure once again. It was like seeing two different people, a wild Kinzo and a composed Kinzo, living together inside one body.
私は決心した。このままぼやききった余生を怠慢に過ごすことなどもはや耐えられはせん。この身に最後にとするコインがあるならば、それを悪魔たちのルーレットに託してみたい。魔法の力はいつもかけるリスクで決まる。日本古来の呪術である牛の国参りがそうであろう。7日間儀式を目撃されてはならないというリスクを支払うからこそ魔力が宿る。困難なリスクが生じれば生じるほどに魔力は強く生じるのだ。神話に登場する数々の奇跡は天文学的リスクに奇跡的な低確率を得て成就した驚愕すべき魔力の結晶なのだと言える。モーゼが海を割ったのは神の奇跡ではない。蹂躙の計りに乗せられ軍勢によって航海に追い詰められた絶体絶命のリスクが奇跡の魔力を生んだのだ。同じことが同じ規模で繰り返されようとも再び海が割れることはないだろう。なぜならモーゼは力ある者たちのルーレットの麻生木ナユタをかけたよりも多く存在する目の中に一つだけ刻まれた奇跡を見事引き寄せることができたからだ。その天文学的確率に勝利できる力、そう奇跡をつかみ取る運気はすなわち魔力なのだ。強大な魔力を得るためには絶望的なリスクを背負わねばならぬ。魔力もたぬ者はそれを賭けでなく自暴自棄と呼ぼう。しかし真に魔力ある者はその奇跡をつかみ取り神秘を成就させるのだ。もしも私にその魔力があるならば私はその奇跡をつかみ取るだろう。生涯を費やした願いを実現できるだろう。
Kinzo looked up to the sky outside the window. He spread his arms as if appealing to someone up in the skies.
もし私にその奇跡を手にする資格があったなら、おお、ベアトリーチェ、ベアトリーチェ、お前の愛くるしい笑顔をもう一度だけ見せてくれ。どれほどの月日を経ようともお前の面影が消えることはない。ただお前の美少が見たい、それだけだ。お前から授かったものを全て返そう。あの日からの栄光を全てお前に返そう。 富も名誉も黄金もいらぬ。お前に授かったすべてを返そう。五章だ、ベアトリーチェ。
This nonsensical yells became a scream, and then a wail. Kinzo slumped to the floor, tearing at it with both hands. Genji had no choice but to wordlessly watch over his master's lamentations.
Yeah, Shokun.
And with that, I think we have came to a good stopping point. If you're enjoying this series, don't forget to rate, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you all in the next episode of Umineko.